I did a lecture last night for a different class, forgot to hit record. So I got to record it again after the fact. No, come on. Zoom, you can work with me. I know you can. No, I don't want to share options. I want to share a page. I need to get me a computer that has multiple screens and stuff like that. That's what I need. All right. So we've got that up. There we go. I think I got it figured out here. All right. If you've come into the class now, let me know at the end. I'm making sure, I think everybody that's in here I've already got. Just let me know. There we go. I think we got it. Okay. So continuing our discussion for week 6. And I hope if I did that. There we go. I got a ring light because I know it's going to be getting darker earlier and my apartment isn't necessarily the best well lit. So I thought, well, that'd be a good way to go. This week, where are we at? Okay, so knowledge. We're going to pick back up talking about knowledge. Clark pointed out that innovation is developed inside of a learning process. And we may have covered this slide already, but it's okay to recap. You're not going to have innovation if you don't have learning going on in your team or organization. Innovation is a byproduct of learning. And as a matter of fact, learning comes with mistakes, as we know. It comes with stress. And as a leader, you want to reduce that stress. You want to increase intellectual friction, but you want to decrease social friction and the other stressors that could cause you or your team to experience unnatural stress. We talked about natural stress being like if a bear walked into the room, we're going to suddenly experience stress. And that's a normal thing. Well, that happens without a bear. Sometimes you could have a situation in your organization where suddenly you found out you've got to present a meeting in 4 days. Most people are going to feel stressed with that. You got to get prepared. You got to be ready. Then you've got to be in front of people, and all this is weighing on your mind. That is a natural stress. But what the leader can do is try to alleviate unnatural stress. In other words, not manufacture situations that are stressful. So you want to try to provide an atmosphere that is free of extraneous potential problems. Clark also stated that in the process of innovation, learning is more important than knowing. Knowing is something, once you have the information, once you've gone through an experience, you have that knowledge now for life. But with innovation, it is the process of learning because as we've talked about before, you don't know what's going to happen. You're dealing with an event that is really non-linear. Learning is a non-linear event. You've got multiple factors that are influencing and affecting the situation. Some of them you can account for, some of them you cannot. At the learning event, there's stress. And so you try to relieve that stress. And then after that learning event, you have a choice. You can go one of two directions. You can cling to the old ways of doing things and return to that pseudo certainty. Remember, humans thrive on certainty. We don't like uncertainty. But certainty means is that we go back to a status quo, the way things have always been done before. And innovation requires that we leave that behind us and we press into the future. With the future being unknown, you're going to have chaos. And that what's going to emerge out of that chaos, the chaos of learning, you're going to have a new policy, a new procedure, a new innovation, a new perspective. Something is going to happen that is new, it's fresh, and it was unexpected. Normally, you're not going to be able to forecast exactly what's going to occur. You might be able to forecast a set of parameters that you expect the result to be in, but still within that set of parameters, there are many points on that spectrum. And so you can't pinpoint exactly what's going to happen. You come to the best that you can in your decision-making process and in your learning process, come up with the best case scenario, worst case scenario, prepare for those and everything between. Then you allow the event to emerge. When it emerges, you will have something that you didn't necessarily expect, at least in part. And it's going to be much better than if you had tried to manipulate the situation and coerce your team members to give you exactly what you wanted. Because your perception is limited because it's based on the past, what you've learned, your perceptions, and the future is not yet written. So while those things do influence the future, there's other things that influence the future. Each member of the team has got their own set of perspectives, their own set of learned skills, behaviors, talents. And when you combine this all together, you actually have a cocktail for a wonderful, innovative emergence in time. Something wonderful is going to happen. But that learning environment must be a safe place. That's why psychological safety is so essential. Develop psychological safety for your teams, for your organizations, especially if you want innovation to happen. Innovation can lead to new products, new services, increased revenue. I'm sorry, that was crazy. Something outside, my neighbor, weird stuff is going on. Anyway, it doesn't affect us. So let's talk a little bit more about innovation. Innovation, it is incremental and it is derivative, meaning that it doesn't necessarily happen all at once. It may come in bits and pieces. It may come in a larger lump than you were expecting, but it may not be complete yet. And that's why after you make a decision or you go through a learning event, you need to evaluate the effectiveness of what has just happened. Whatever you've implemented, whatever's emerged, you have got to evaluate it for its effectiveness. If it's not effective the way that it needs to be, then you have to go back and tweak some things or change some aspects in there. And that's fine, because remember, mistakes happen. And it's a wise leader who admits to a mistake and then allows for themselves and their team to go back to the drawing board and to see what can we salvage from that event, what's good and we need to retain, what are the things that are not working, what's not being effective, and let's concentrate on fixing that. And so it is iterative, incremental. I mean, derivative and incremental. Sorry. My brain and my lips were not coordinating there. Type 2, now that's type 1 innovation. Type 2 innovation, it's radical, it's disruptive, it's quick, it's immediate, it's fast, it's out of nowhere, it's boom, out of left field. So type 1 innovation, you're working toward. Type 1 innovation, you're working toward. Type 2 innovation, it can just pop up out of nowhere. That's why by getting your team into psychological safety and through all 4 stages, you have them prepared now to be innovative. Not necessarily to do innovation, but to be the innovation. Because they're safe, they'll contribute. They'll challenge the status quo. They'll learn. They'll mesh together. They'll communicate. They'll come together as one unit, as one team. And sometimes this innovation will pop up almost out of nowhere. But when you really look at it and analyze it, you did all the prep work in advance. Maybe for the last year, you've been working at building up psychological safety for your team. And all of a sudden, this new idea, this new product emerges. It's the innovation you were wanting. But you didn't get the team working on a project to become innovative. You were just getting them to be psychologically safe. By providing them the safe space, they themselves became creative, which led to the innovation. So connection. Connection is essential. Clark noted that when people are interconnected, they can connect more things. Networking is something that you need to do as you get closer and closer to your graduation. networking is really a big step in the hiring process, in getting a job. You got a dream job you want to get, you got a dream position in mind. You need to be networking with people that have that position or are in charge of people in that position. You need to rub elbows with people. They need to know who you are. They need to know what your goals are, what your ethics are, your work ethics and stuff like that. They need to know why you want that and what you can contribute. And I would recommend coming up with a 15, 20-second elevator pitch. Does anybody know what an elevator pitch is?
Sorry, what?
Does anybody know what an elevator pitch is?
I do not.
Okay, so you're at your office, you get into the elevator, or you're by the coffee pot, you press the button to go up the floor, or you're pouring your coffee. Somebody comes up and you start talking. Hey, my name is Brian. I have my PhD and yada, yada, yada. I work in such and such department. These are the things that we're working on. My goal, this is my goal, what I'm working towards in life. You get that done in 20 seconds or less, and you're networking now. You pass a business card to that individual, or you connect, exchange phone numbers, however you want to do it. You connect with that person. You put a bug in their brain. Maybe they know somebody who's looking for somebody like you with your skill set. And they're thinking maybe that later that day or in a couple of days, and they're thinking about meeting you, and they're like, I wonder if Joe could talk to Corey. I wonder if Joe could use Peter or Alexander. So networking, you want to have about a 20-second elevator pitch. So the time it takes to go from one floor in a building to another floor in an elevator, that's how long your pitch should be. So just get that kind of prepared, who you are, what your goals are, what your aspirations are, your skill set, cram it in 20 seconds in a coherent way that isn't like a machine gun fire of words. That's an elevator pitch. And if you want, we can actually work in developing an elevator pitch for you. We got a few more, we got another 10 weeks in class. So we can work on that if you'd like. It's a good tool to use when networking, because connection is the key to get a job. Now, once you are a leader for a team, you need to promote connection in several ways. One, interconnection among your team members. They need to know each other. They need to be able to go bowling together on occasion or go out to dinner once in a while as a team together. They need to build up a rapport, a friendship, okay? That's because the more that they're interconnected, the more they will share ideas with each other. As these ideas are shared in a psychologically safe environment, the more that innovation and creativity can start churning between these team members. Now, another way that you want to promote connection for your team is within the department that you're in. So teams will usually be under a department or in a department. You want your team members to be able to connect with other people in that department, but don't stop there. What about the rest of the organization? Absolutely. Don't stop there. Why not promote for them to connect on LinkedIn with people that are in their same profession or the same job set or skill set and job role? The only caveat is that you never divulge sensitive information about anybody in that organization. So if I'm networking with people, I'm not going to be talking to people about details about my students. Generalization type things, yes. General problems, yes. General successes, yes. But I'm not going to sit down and say, oh, did you know this about Peter? Yada, 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 yada. No, don't do that. And if there are any projects that are being worked on, you might be able to talk about a general overview of the project, but you don't go into specifics because you want your organization to gain a competitive advantage. And you don't go out and share the intelligence of the sensitive things. And so if you're developing a new widget, I like to use widgets, you're developing a brand new widget and you've got some proprietary technology that you're using in it. Don't go tell people about that. You don't want your team members telling people about that. There probably will be a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA, that people will have to sign. However, you can network with people across the globe that are in a similar or the same job role, and you can bounce ideas off of each other about, well, I teach college and I teach management courses and leadership courses. What would be a good way, or how have you found success in teaching psychological safety for teams? That's a great thing. Now I can get other people's perspectives and experiences. But I'm not going to sit there and say, well, Alexander did this on his assignment. And I'm not going to go through that because that's too detailed. That's personal information. That's private information to be held either within the team or between that employee and the supervisor. Something else you can do that just came to my mind, if it's still in there. It's gone. I apologize. You know, age. I guess I'm showing my age. Okay, so this interconnection, this is actually a perfect segue into the next 8 weeks of this course. Okay, so once we finish up with psychological safety for teams, and once we finish up the case studies, we're going to be getting into talking about systems thinking. Our next textbook was written by Barry Oshry. Barry Oshry is a big name in systems thinking. Systems thinking falls under systems theory. Some people say, well, systems theory isn't really beneficial or shouldn't be taught in business education or leadership education. However, some huge names in academia disagree with that. People like Peter Singhay, Barry Oshry. Okay, these are people that say, no, we need more people to know how to do this. And it's a way of viewing things around you. It will change how you view your team, your organization. It's helped me with my own friendships and relationships. It has benefited me in so many ways because, in a nutshell, you analyze each element within a system. Then you step back and you look at how these elements are interconnected. So to see the interconnection, you don't analyze them. You look with something called synthesis. Synthesis. My mouth is just not working. Synthesis. And so you use that instead of analysis. There you're looking about how do these policies, these projects, these people, these various elements interconnect together. Then you step back further because every system is within a system. So a team is a system, but it's in a department system, which is in an organizational system, which is in an industry system. And we keep on going out until finally you hit the universe level, because after that, there's just nothing bigger that we know of at this point. So think about our solar system. You got Earth rotating around the sun, revolving around the sun, the moon and the Earth revolving together, going around the sun. All these planets, they are a system. Our solar system is a system, but it is part of a galaxy, the Milky Way. And this galaxy moves and interacts, and the gravitational forces interact with each other, and it's turning and churning through the universe, but it's not by itself. It's one of, I want to say, what is it, trillions, potentially, of other galaxies? So it's a system within a system within a system, but we can use systems thinking to be able to break things down so we can understand them easier, because when you get to the holistic view, it can be overwhelming. That's why I'm going to be teaching you in the next 8 weeks how to think in this way. Honestly, the business world needs it. I am in total agreement with Peter Singhay, Barry Oshry, and many countless others. But let's continue with psychological safety, the process of innovation particularly. Clark pointed out that sometimes innovation occurs through, really? Sorry. I am experiencing a brief technical issue. There we go. The problem is Zoom puts this window right in front of my words half the time. Okay, so Clark pointed out that sometimes innovation occurs through a burst of inspiration. Remember a minute ago we were saying that there's type 1 innovation and type 2 innovation? Well, when innovation occurs through a burst of inspiration, that's going to be primarily type 2 innovation. And it's usually due to a social interconnectivity that led to it. And so people talking to people, ideas and perspectives and skills being passed around. Did you know you can actually learn without actually experiencing or doing the project or the experience? It's called vicarious learning. And if you've had organizational behavior, I teach it there. It's one of the ways you learn. You hear people's stories, you hear their experiences, what they went through, along with their perspectives. And now your mind, because your mind is neuroplastic, meaning it can shape and move and remold itself with the neurons. It restructures itself. The more that you hear a story, your mind creates a schema, a pathway. And it's almost as though you lived that experience. When we watch a horror movie and there's a part that's really scary and we get scared, our mind does not know that it is fake. Now, we know it's fake with logic, but in our emotional aspect, our mind processes it as though it literally happened to us. Then our logical mind comes in and says, it's just a movie, don't worry about it, and we relax. So if it happens that way with a horror movie, so too it works when people tell you stories. That's why I bring stories about my time in the Navy, the Army, corrections, as a senior executive in a nonprofit, and there are various things I've done in school, because I want you to be able to learn vicariously through my stories. So I use it as a tool in teaching, and that's a pedagogical tool, fancy word for a teaching tool. Clark also points out that bringing together multiple ideas from multiple people can lead to innovation. So this interconnectivity, this social interconnectivity, it must have ideas being passed between the individuals. Without that, you just have people hanging out. But if you have them passing ideas back and forth, now you get that creativity going, and the type 2 innovation can start building slowly, and then boom, a burst of it out of nowhere. Because while type 2 innovation looks like it pops out of nowhere, it comes from this slow and subtle interconnectivity that builds it up until finally, pop, there it is. Where type 1, you consciously work at building it up through connecting people, through working on projects, through doing this, through doing that, and then it occurs. So both take some preparation. One is an active approach to innovation. The other, it's really a non-active approach, a passive approach to innovation. People sharing ideas, and these ideas begin to grow, and you merge those ideas with your own ideas and with someone else's ideas. And before long, you have that new technology for that brand new device. You got to figure it out. And it looks like it came out of nowhere, but it came out of this interconnectivity. Leaders need to take time to observe their teams and determine how they are interconnected. You don't have to actively go in with a clipboard necessarily and look like you're a researcher and making notes and stuff like this. Just interact with your team members on a daily basis. And one of the things you're looking for, because you're going to be looking for a lot of things, but one is, how well are they interconnected? How do they connect with each other? Are they using social media? Are they using technology? Are they emailing each other? Are they talking in an elevator or in the break room? How are they really connecting? Where are they getting their moments of connectivity? As a leader, you're also going to be observing their organizational behavior. How do they behave inside that team, inside the organization? You're going to be noting their performance. And so as a leader, you've got to be very observant, but you don't necessarily make it apparent that you're observing. You become a passive observer. Leaders must encourage their teams to ask questions, even at the expense of personal risk. while providing a safe space to ask the questions. You probably noticed I try every class to, at least at one point, or preferably more than one point, try to ask if anybody has any questions or any comments. I'm giving you an opportunity to give this information. Now, there is a personal risk. Every human being fears, at some degree, blurting out their ideas or their perceptions or their questions in front of a group. Why? Because we don't want people to think that we're stupid. We have an ego. We have pride. We're very proudful creatures. But a leader can make that environment safer by doing what? Instilling psychological safety, taking the team members through each of the stages. Because remember, fear and ridicule are pushed out of psychological safety. Judgment is pushed out of psychological safety. Reprise is pushed out. Mistakes. It's part of the learning process. They happen. And mistakes can actually lead to innovation you never planned for. A mistake can lead to a type 2 innovative moment. So a good leader knows that. So here's a diagram from your textbook, and I forget what page exactly it was on. This is the decision cycle, because as a leader, you're going to have to use decision making in implementing psychological safety for your team, especially in stage 3 and stage 4, the contributor stage and the challenger stage. You need people to be thinking in this way. You need to be thinking in this way. First, you ask questions. 2, you collect data. 3, you recognize patterns. 4, you reach conclusions. And 5, you make a decision. Now, you personally might decide to use a decision tree, a pros and cons list, a 2x2 matrix, a decision matrix, or maybe brainstorming. But brainstorming really takes more than one person. You can do it by yourself, but it's more effective with more than one person. But you can teach these to your team. And the team as a whole can enter into these decision-making exercises. And you collect even more questions, even more data. You recognize even more patterns. You can reach a more solid conclusion and make a better decision when you include a group. And so as a team leader, why not include your team, especially if you've been instilling and applying psychological safety? So talking a bit more about decisions, Clark warned that the natural consequence of analysis is friction. The leaders need to make sure that their teams know that there are no dumb questions. There really aren't. If you don't know something, it doesn't matter if everybody else knows it. You don't know it. And if you're part of the team, you need to learn that information. And I don't know what you don't know unless you tell me through asking a question. And no questions or topics are off limit. Small caveat, we want to make sure that we remain true to diversity, equity, inclusion, that we're ethical, and we're not asking questions that are hurtful. These questions don't have a malicious intent behind them. They are actually coming from a good place. They're coming from a good part of our mind, our heart. So analysis leads to friction because you've got people breaking down something somebody said. You have the ability to take my words and break down what I'm saying and analyze it and find, is he telling something that's true or is he fabricating something? I try to provide citations and references for everything I can outside of my personal experiences because I want you to be able to know that I found this somewhere and you can go validate what I just said. You can verify it. So with a team, there are no dumb questions. Just make sure that your team doesn't engage in things that are hurtful, like racism, sexism, harassment, ridicule, judgment. These things come from a malicious place, and they don't have a place on a psychologically safe team. So now there are some dangers. And Clark, he noted that when a leader does not provide challenger safety, so the last stage, the team is set on a course of upholding the status quo. If you have got your team through stages 1, 2, and 3, but you haven't taken them in stage 4, then they're still holding on to the old way of doing things. Because the old way of doing things, you don't challenge the status quo. The almighty status quo is enshrined up upon a shelf, and people walk by and they salute it every day. You give honor to the status quo, the way we've always done it before. It's tradition. Challenger safety breaks down that tradition. There's a cognitive bias called echo chamber. An echo chamber is when you have multiple people in a group and they all echo the same thing. And so if they come up with an idea, we'll call it idea XYZ, and they never challenge it, they don't dissect it, they don't bring in different perspectives to come up with idea ABC and LMN as alternatives, all they are is passing around the same XYZ idea. And that's all that anybody hears, that's all they say. And it reinforces it. And it reinforces it. And it begins to become like a chamber where all you have is an echo of the same thing over and over and over. That is a bad bias to have, because if you want innovation, you need to challenge the old ways of saying things, doing things, perceiving things. You need to find something that's new. You need innovation, creativity. You need interconnectivity. Organizational structure also can promote something like an echo chamber, such as an organization that is siloed, meaning every team is within a department and that department doesn't interact with other departments. You may be in a team that is siloed within a department. So you have a department that's siloed, and then you have teams that are siloed in the department. So there's no cross communication. A very effective form of organizational structure is a cross-functional matrix. And there, the teams interrelate across, not just within a department, but across the whole organization. Ideas can flourish there. It's safe to challenge the status quo there. Clark asks, what can you do to reduce the social friction on your team while increasing the intellectual friction? I say, get rid of silos. A silo is those big tower things you see on farms next to a barn usually, and it holds just tons of grain. It's a silo. So think of several of those next to each other. And if you grew up in the Midwest, you've seen that very often at a co-op or something. These silos, the grain doesn't go into other silos. It stays in the silo it's a part of. So there's no cross communication, no interaction. When you change into a cross-functional system, it'd be like all that grain now gets mixed together. HR department is talking to the receiving department and talking to the shipping department and talking to the research and development department. You get people talking from all different departments. But remember, Clark also did note that when you are bringing a team together to work on a project, you want people that are actually invested in that project. If you're trying to develop a new phone, you may not bring in a neurologist. They're a specialist in their field. They're brilliant, but they don't have the skill set or the experience that pertains to that task or project. So make sure that your tasks and projects have the right people with the right skill sets and experiences, But sometimes that person might be working in HR, another person might be working over in R&D, and another person in sales. But yet they all have the skill sets that are needed for this project. You bring them together, cross-functional communication. It's that matrix happening. But while they're from different teams and departments, they have the skills that are needed for that project. You need to seek out differences and reduce ridicule. Clark noted that leaders should not strive to attain consensus or complacent. What did I write there? Complacence? Is that even a word? Was I awake when I wrote this? We don't want to have consensus, and we don't want people to become compliant. That's what I was trying to for. Compliance. It's actually spelled right. My brain just shorted out. I mean, I'm so sorry. My students, I feel for you. You guys are the best. You put up with me. Thank you. You don't want consensus or compliance. The reason being is because you need to make sure that people are giving their input. When you seek a consensus, some people are just going to say what everyone else is saying so that there is a consensus and there's no friction. But you're not getting everyone's perspectives. You're not challenging the status quo. So don't try to get a consensus. And you don't want people being compliant. In other words, just acquiescing to someone else's ideas. Because then you got, instead of having this really diverse organization and team, it becomes almost mono-focused around one core group of people. And everyone else, it's like they're there just to praise and support these people for their great ideas. No, everybody on the team should be able to give their input. Diversity in composition can lead to diversity of thought. That's what I was talking about when I was saying bring a person from HR, bring a person from R&D, a person from sales, but make sure they have the correct skill sets and experience sets for the task or project. Because if you bring people in to a team to work on a project and they don't have the right skill sets, knowledge base, experience, now you're bringing in people that have really nothing to contribute. Like my example, you bring the neurologist in, but you're working on the next communication device. He's not going to have much that he can give. But it gets even worse than that. Sometimes people have self-motives and self-agendas, and they want to promote their ideas or the ideas of their team or department. And if the project really is under one department and you bring in people from another department who have their own agendas, it could thwart the efforts of this project. You want to make sure everyone is aligned, that everyone is invested in achieving this goal. After that, yes, you need diversity. You need people from all ethnicities. We need all genders. We need people that are neurodivergent. Everyone's welcomed at that point. So you have diversity of humans, but you reduce the diversity of personal agendas. You reduce the diversity of mono-focusing on a task that's only going to work for this department. Don't bring in somebody from HR if you don't need to have that skill set there, because they might twist things around to benefit their department or their division. Clark does not advocate monocultural teams, meaning ethnically teams that are not diversified or inclusive at all. Rather, he's pointing out that the team must be made up of people with roles that relate to the task at hand. When the team comprises people with the same role or skill set, groupthink can happen. So here's another problem. If you bring in people all with the same skill set, all with the same actual focus, you get groupthink. Groupthink is similar to echo chamber. So let's find an analogy for this. We go back to making our widget. And we're going to bring people in, but we select people that only have a college degree in widget making. While it's good to have people with that particular knowledge base, because we're making a widget, we need people that understand other parts of the technology that's going into it, or the other parts that go into the development or production of this. So there's the diversity. You bring people in with skill sets that relate to the project, but you want a diversity of them among the team. And so I, with my skill set, could be one of two people on a team working on a project. Somebody who deals with accounting could be another part. Somebody who deals with public relations might be the third. We're bringing people in with different skill sets and different knowledge bases, but each of us are focused on this project. We're not doing it for our departments. We're not doing it for ourselves. We're doing it. We want to see this project be developed. And so you have diversity, but you also have non-diversity at the same time. People from all ethnicities and genders and everything, boom, welcome in. People with the right skill sets need to be brought in, but they need to be different enough so they have something to contribute. But the goal is all focused on the same thing. That's where that diversity then ends. We're not doing it for the HR department. We're not doing it for the research department. We're doing it for this particular project, for whoever department is heading it up. We're doing it for them. We realize that. We're not going to twist it. I hope I made that clear. That can be a touchy subject to get into because it sounds like I'm saying Clark is against diversity, and he's not. He's for diversity when you're talking ethnicity, national origin, religion, gender, all that. He's all for that. And he's all for people having their own specific skill sets. But when you're working on a project, you've got to carefully select your team members so that you have the skills you need, and the people have to have the right focus. I think I harped on that enough. So diversity of people groups is always welcome, but too many people from unrelated departments/teams can cause stagnation. That's because of groupthink, okay? Groupthink is, it's like an echo chamber, but it's where you have a group of people, let's say our classroom, and all we do is we interact with each other. So we almost create this echo chamber, right? Well, now we develop something even worse, and that's groupthink. Meaning, if I'm going to perceive something, if I'm going to analyze something, I'm going to do it as though the group is doing it instead of me as an individual. Groupthink now, I'm looking at a situation as though I am Peter, Alexander, Savannah, Corey, Bonnie, everybody, and I look at it through your eyes only, and I'm not bringing my own special perspective. So while the group does have a personality and identity, each individual should always maintain their personality and their identity and their perspective. So you want a diversification of perspective, a monoculture of focus. You're focused on one thing. That group's culture is we're working on this project, but we all bring our own independent ways of viewing and our own skill sets that are beneficial to this project. With the right combination, a team can develop a theater of conflict, which needs to be free from ridicule. Now, normally in management, business, and leadership, you want to talk about conflict resolution. Here, we're trying to create conflict, but not for the sake of conflict. We want people to be able and bold enough to stand up and say, I disagree with that idea. I disagree with that perspective. And here's why. The second half of the sentence is really the most important part. It's okay to disagree, but really, please tell me why you disagree, because you might be right. I could be wrong. We want that friction, that intellectual friction. That's that intellectual friction. People being able to stand up and say, I disagree with that, and here's why. So you want that on your team, but you want that to be a theater of conflict, free of ridicule, judgment, and malintention. Fear and ridicule. Fear and ridicule oppose challenger safety. I think we've seen that quite plainly in this lecture and even in past lectures. But when people are fear are free, when people are free from fear and ridicule, they can be free to become creative, according to Clark. When you're not worried about if I ask a question, people are going to think I'm being dumb or that it's a stupid question, or I self-censor because I'm not giving my ideas on something, or I'm not disagreeing with something I honestly disagree with, that's self-censorship. If I'm free from that, that group can now become really creative as they interconnect together. Leaders who use ridicule cause their team to become less interested in developing new ideas. When I was in the Army, there were two teams in my unit, in my company. Alpha Company 104 MI, Military Intelligence. I was on one team. The other team had a different sergeant, Sergeant C. Sergeant C would ridicule and basically harass his team members. It was a really kind of what you think of stereotypical military team environment. A lot of ridicule. My team was different. I tried to bring servant leadership in. I tried to bring in a lot of the concepts we're talking about, but I hadn't been educated on them at that time. It just seemed like the right thing to do. Everybody on my team had a voice at the right time. Because at other times, I had to operate as an authoritarian leader. Because if we're in a combat situation and I issue an order, it must happen right then and there because I have access to information they didn't have, and they just had to learn to trust that I wasn't going to guide them wrong. And we developed that trust through always training together. And also spending time eating pizza together or drinking beer together or stuff like that. We spent time together. We interconnected. The other team, they were not really effective. They weren't that effective in their missions. My team was. Our efficiency rate was much higher. We got awards. We got recognized. Not just me, the leader, but the whole team got the awards. We were doing something right. We took away that fear, that ridicule, that judgment. Oh, we still would mess around with each other. There was always joking and stuff, but everybody knew each other so well, they knew this is joking. This is serious. And we didn't cross lines of having a bad intention, malintention behind what we were doing or saying. So you have to have an environment free from fear and ridicule, and leaders do not ever use ridicule. It's not going to be effective. It's going to cause your team to self-censor. It's going to cause your team to cling to the old status quo. Leaders should be open to new ideas while being free to be wrong. In leadership, when you make a decision, sometimes you really just need to stick to that decision. Other times you need to be willing to say, I made a mistake and go back to the drawing board. How do you know which one is right for the moment? Which approach? First of all, if I'm going to make a decision and I'm going to fully just stick to it, regardless of anything, I spent a lot of time evaluating every potential alternative. I looked at all the data and information I could. I included people from my team, my group, in the decision-making process. And we worked on that decision together. And as a group, we were confident that's the best choice. So as the leader, I implemented it. I would stand by that decision. But there's another step. After you implement a decision, you have to evaluate its effectiveness, right? So if it's not being effective, then I still have to go back to the drawing board and start over. So as a leader, if you make a mistake in your decision, you go back. And the way you know you made a mistake, look at its effectiveness. If it's not effective, there's a problem. If it's effective, then stick to that decision. Clark pointed out that leaders not only develop challenger safety, but they also get to receive it. You see, a leader is a beneficiary of psychological safety for a team. When leaders seek personal gain or recognition, they destroy their team's ability to innovate. if I was seeking awards, if I was seeking fame, if I was seeking recognition, a pat on the back, and I was doing it for myself, that's having a personal self agenda. That's having a self-motivated agenda. But I'm making the whole team do the project just so I can look good. That's not good. That's not healthy. Leaders need to be able to realize that their team as a whole needs to be recognized and rewarded. That they, as a leader, are nothing more than just a team member with a specific role. At the end of the day, a leader is still just a team member. Granted, they've got more responsibilities. Granted, they have more responsibilities, and I already said that the more is expected of them. So you don't want self-censorship. So you need to not try to steal that safety that you create for yourself. Don't create psychological safety for a team just so you can have psychological safety. Just so you can challenge the status quo, just so you can contribute ideas, just so you can make mistakes in learning. That is the wrong approach. Your team is going to begin to self-censor. Bring in psychological safety for everybody, including yourself, but the entire team, each person on that team, they need to benefit from it. Now, some form of ego, self-centeredness, is good. To a degree. That's why we are motivated to do a lot of the things that we do. It's one of the prime areas that can easily motivate somebody. But when you're controlled by that ego to the point that you will manipulate an entire team of people or an entire organization just for your own gratification, your own ego, your own success, we've really crossed a bridge into something that's very dangerous. Ethically, morally dangerous. Sharing roles on the team. Leaders should have each team member take turns leading team meetings. As a leader, I shouldn't lead every single meeting. Some of them, sure. All of them, no. Why should I do that? Because if I tell Jacob, I want you to lead this next meeting, he has a chance now to prepare information, present information, stand up before the group. He has a chance to step into the role as a leader during that meeting. I'm helping prepare him for his future. I'm also sharing some of that authority that I have as a leader with Jacob at that point. And then next week, Peter gets an opportunity. But during the meeting, as the leader, I sit there and I may make a comment or two, ask a question at the end, but I limit what I say. I want the rest of the team to feel like they can talk to each other. And so I'm promoting the interconnectedness. I'm there, I'm present. I'm going to keep things safe. I will interject when I need to, but I'd rather have everyone else. I'd rather have Savannah and Corey giving their input. Jacob's leading the meeting. Everyone's giving their input, asking questions, challenging the status quo. It creates an environment that's actually, it makes it easier to challenge a status quo. Let me check our time here. 2:45. So we've been at this, what, an hour? Okay, now we're doing good on time. This moves into the ask-tell ratio. It ties back to that. If you remember, we talked about that a few weeks ago. Leaders should ask more than they tell their team members. So by having Jacob lead the meeting, I'm asking Jacob, I want you to present this information. I'm not telling the team the information. I'm asking Jacob, you put together the presentation and you present it. I'm involving him. I'm involving your intellect. I'm involving your perspectives. And it all ties back to, this is servant leadership in practice. You see, a leader should be there literally for the team. Being a servant leader doesn't mean I go fetch donuts and coffee every Monday morning. Maybe I do that once in a while. That's great. But it goes deeper than that. It's that I'm confident enough that I'm the leader and I'm confident in myself. I don't need to be in front of every meeting. I can put other people in charge of things. I can share my responsibility. I can share my authority. We can work on this together. That's servant leadership. Like-mindedness can easily destroy innovation. Like-mindedness ties right back to groupthink and the echo chamber bias. When everybody comes up with the same answers, it might be because they're self-censoring, they're avoiding challenging the status quo. It could be that they are fearful that they're going to be looked at as being dumb for asking the question, or they're going to be looked at and ridiculed because of their perception, their perspective. We don't want that on our teams. We want our teams to be able to be individuals, yet come together as a team of individuals working on a project or a goal in concert with each other. When you go to a symphony, the conductor is up there with his baton, and he's conducting, but you have the woodwind section comprised of a multitude of individuals playing woodwinds, the brass section, a multitude of people, rhythm, everything. Everybody is different. They're individuals, but they bring everything together as individuals, each playing their own part, and it creates a beautiful symphony. Much the same way a team made up of a group of individuals, each with their own perceptions, perspectives, skill sets, knowledge base, experiences, coming together into a concert. And the leader is like the conductor with the baton, and he's leading everybody as a unit. Together, they sound magnificent. It's not the leader that sounds magnificent. It's the group as a whole. And leaders can begin to learn a little technique called playing the devil's advocate. And that helps to combat the like-mindedness that can occur. This, you may have heard of before. If we are discussing the benefits of, let's think of something. The benefits of doing all of our classes on Zoom and not having any sessions actually in the classroom. If I'm playing the devil's advocate, I'm going to bring up counterpoints why we shouldn't do that. Well, we have international students. They need to get the credit for on-time classes, so we don't want to exclude them. We have students in this class that are in other parts of the world. We don't want to exclude them. I'm bringing up the counterpoints. Or maybe somebody says, we should paint the room red. And everybody says, oh, that'd be a great color. And I say, red, that's okay, but what about off-white with beige trim? You see what I'm saying? The devil's advocate plays the other side, brings up the counter arguments. Even though I may not want a beige room with, or a off-white room with beige trim, I might want a red room. As a leader playing the devil's advocate, I'm going to advocate for a different view, the opposite view. Not because I want it, but because I want to break up like-mindedness. I want to encourage individuality inside of a team. The team is homogeneous, meaning it's brought into being one, but it's still got differentiation in all the different people, the individuals inside there. And that's beautiful because it's both homogeneous and differentiated. Sometimes the team gets into that group think, the echo chamber, they become like-minded. And the leader's got to play the devil's advocate to break that up so that people start challenging the status quo again. Because now all of a sudden painting the room red has become the status quo. And we don't want to go back to a status quo, so let's challenge it. This can help stimulate new ideas, which of course goes back to developing creativity, moments of chaos, and innovation. I found an article by Cthulhu and Chaffrey. I like to pronounce names right, and I'm not certain about that first one, and I apologize. They found that they found a connection between benevolent leadership and the development of psychological safety. So a leader's leadership style directly impacts the employees, the staff, the team. If a leader adopts an authoritarian leadership style, which there is a place for that where it's appropriate, such as the military, that leadership style affects the people under that leader. When I was in the Army, I chose authoritarian leadership style blended with servant leadership. And my team was impacted by that, thankfully, in a positive way. These researchers define benevolent leadership as being a form of individualized care within a work domain, such as allowing opportunities to correct mistakes, avoiding the public humiliation of subordinates, providing coaching and mentoring, striving to solve subordinates' work problems, and showing concern for subordinates. In other words, a benevolent leader is almost like a servant leader, but maybe even more empathy. So think of a servant leader with even more empathy, you'd have a benevolent leader. The researchers wrote that psychological safety refers to members' perception of an interpersonal context in which they are comfortable being themselves. We just said we want a homogenized team brought into being one as a unit, made up of differentiated individuals, each maintaining their individuality. You can maintain your individuality while being part of a collective. That is possible with psychological safety being provided. That's the tool that allows that unique blend to occur. The researchers stated that employees who perceive high levels of psychological safety are thus more likely to engage in voice behavior. Okay, yeah, I was right. More likely to engage in voice behavior, meaning they're willing to speak up and give their dissent, their input, their critique, to challenge the status quo. They're more likely to trust in a leader. They're more likely to take involved in risk taking and alternate thinking, all of which are expected to foster the psychological well-being. So what this basically says is if you are experiencing high levels of psychological safety in that team, you're going to voice your concerns, voice where you agree, where you disagree, give your input, play the devil's advocate, be a constructive dissenter. You're going to trust the leader more because that leader is giving back to you through benevolence and protecting you from ridicule and fear. You're going to be willing to take risks, to try new things, because you know if I make a mistake, it's okay. We still learn, and we might accidentally innovate in the process. You find this will actually help individuals on that team feel better about themselves. And that will affect not only their work performance, it'll impact them in their home life, with their friends, and in the community. We spend a majority of our day in a job, at work, in an organization, on a team. Sometimes we actually see our coworkers more than we do our significant others. Just think about this. You work 8 hours a day. You throw in lunch, you're there 8.5, 9 hours a day. Awake, talking, working, doing stuff. You go home. You might be up for a couple hours, 4 or 5 hours, and then you're normal. You're in to go to sleep. Sleep 6 to 8 hours, get up, get ready for work, go at it again. So you're seeing your work crew more than you see your family. So what happens in your job can impact your personal life directly. So as a leader, I don't want to create a scenario where my staff, my team members, my employees are so stressed out, so full of fear, so worried about being ridiculed and judged that then they go home and they carry that negative psychological baggage with them. No, no, no. I want happy employees, which means I need to be concerned not only about you while you're at work, but also your well-being outside of work. Not that I stop by your home and I check up on you, but that when I am your leader in the job setting, I do things in a way that I'm not overstressing you in a negative manner. The researchers found that the performance of employees is directly related, let me try English, found that the performance of employees is directly related to their sense of well-being. If you feel good about yourself, you're going to perform better. You're going to have a better behavior also. You're going to behave better. They also found that this increased sense of well-being affected the leaders, managers, and staff. So not only do the employees, the team members benefit, the leaders benefit as well. They pointed out that a social contract, including psychological well-being, precedes employees experiencing increased well-being. In other words, you come, you get a job, you're hired to be on my team. There is an implied social contract that occurs where I need to take it seriously that while you are under my watch at work, I try to help you have the best possible well-being and experience you can at work, because you're taking that with you the rest of the day when you're not here. So I've got a responsibility on my shoulders, and most people don't think about that when they think of being a leader. They don't think, oh, you mean when that person goes home, I still have a responsibility over them? Yes. Yes, you do. Because if I took the whole day making you feel bad, you're going to go home and take that negativity with you. But if I'm a benevolent servant leader, bringing psychological safety, your well-being at work is better. Your well-being in your social life, in your home life is better. So there's an implied social contract there. And if you have a job where there is no psychological safety and your leader is totally dictatorial, authoritarian, I'm willing to bet you won't be working there for all that long. You won't be there for a couple of years. You may not even stay a couple months because you're going to be feeling like you're being abused at work. And then you would take that home with you. When I worked in corrections, I only worked there a year and a half. Most of the other guards and the supervisors were not high quality people. And you're in a stressful situation where your very life could depend upon the guard in the next pod over. And if you can't trust that person, you have fear for your life. Eventually, I said, this is enough. I left. The researchers further noted that leaders could increase employee trust by giving credit for their achievements, listening to and being concerned about the needs of the staff, and developing bi-directional communication channels. If your staff does a good job, praise them, publicly praise them, in front of the department if you can. Post it on the wall, on a picture, employee of the week, whatever you got to do. That kind of is the basis for the employee of the month type plaques you see in businesses sometimes, but it became just the status quo. That's just how we do it. So find a new way to show that person that they are stellar. Find a new way to praise that staff member. So let's take just a couple quick minutes and we're going to consider what all this, along with the material we've discussed in past lectures, what this means for leadership. Leaders need to have a productive leadership style. We got 15 minutes. We got it. If your leadership style is not producing good results, change your leadership style. This requires that the leader needs to conduct regular self-assessments to determine their leadership style and to discover how they need to adapt it or what they need to adapt to it to make it better. Leaders need to be patient with their employees, yet they also need to keep up with the demands placed on them by the organization. An organization will set deadlines and parameters and waypoints, benchmarks, and you have to keep up with those. but you have to balance it also with the well-being of your team. There's a balance between the two, a very delicate balance. Leaders must listen to their team members. Remember, you listen more than you tell. Well, you ask more than you tell. You also need to listen more than you speak. Never allow ridicule or harassment. Remove fear. There needs to be an atmosphere of trust and safety. Leaders sometimes need to add an element of disruption through assigning somebody to be the constructive dissenter, or the leader themselves plays the devil's advocate, or you assign someone to play the devil's advocate. This can help stimulate innovation, creativity. This is not to be a form of attack or oppression, and this often comes from having people sift through the processes to identify potential innovation areas to innovate in. So you assign somebody, in this case, it'll be Crystal. She's our constructive dissenter. She needs to go through how we conduct our business, our policies, our procedures, our interactions, and find areas that need to be fixed. She's finding areas to dissent on in a constructive manner. She's been assigned that task. By her doing that, we can actually become better as a team and actually innovate. Team members need to be able to learn while being allowed or permitted to make mistakes. Remember now that if you're doing heart surgery, a mistake is not a good thing. So there are obvious some caveats that go with that. But if we're working on making the new model of widgets and a mistake happens in the microchip part of it, okay, we developed it wrong. That was a mistake. We have to go back and fix it, and there is a cost to the organization, but I shouldn't take that out on my employees. Team members should be encouraged to contribute new ideas without the fear, the unnatural fear that can cause self-censorship. Team members need permission in exchange for performance. Remember, I give you permission. Because you've been performing, I give you that permission now. That's essential in psychological safety. Psychological safety isn't just something the leader just automatically gives. The team works together to achieve it, with the leader conducting the symphony. Individuals are granted more freedom to contribute new ideas and challenge the status quo as they perform. Leaders should not take any challenge to the status quo as a personal attack. Remember, as a leader, you become agnostic in regards to your role, your position, your title. Meaning you have that, but that's not who you are. You're a team member with a specific role. Humility is a quality that good leaders need to have. I'm going to say must have. If you want to be a good leader, make sure to be humble. The end. So right now, honestly, I enjoy teaching psychological safety for teams. It is it's in the top 3 of my favorite subjects. Absolutely love it. Does anybody in the class have any questions, comments, concerns, complaints, or otherwise comments?
I don't, but I don't know if other people do.
Okay. Well, if you have them, you can send them to me, or you can ask them right here in the classroom. Both are accepted. They're both good ways to do things. I just don't like to end a lecture without allowing time for people to give input. So what we're going to do now is we are going to be done for the day. But let me remind you to keep up with your module this week and make sure you get things turned in on time. When you use a source, use APA 7 for your references and your citations. And I will be getting more things graded today and tomorrow. So you'll be seeing those being reflected on your grade, on your grades. All right. With that said, you have a great rest of your Wednesday. In other words, class is dismissed.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Alexander.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Awesome. Thank you. You too. Marianne, I got you. I'll put you down for the day. You're here. You got credit. No worries. I understand things happen. All right. Good night, everybody.